Hello, I'm Larry Lee with Brownfield Ag News Network. Dr. Darrell Peel joins us from Oklahoma State University, ag economist and professor there. Darrell, cattle markets have been rather strange and rather interesting lately. We've seen a lot of prices go down. We've seen unusual events. The one that I'd like to start off with here has to do with a situation in Wisconsin where one of the major buyers for feeder cattle didn't participate in some auctions this week. Is this a sign of trouble, or is this just a small regional issue?
Well, the specific manifestation is kind of regional in the sense of buying cattle out of auctions versus the other ways that the packers procure cattle. But it's really part of a nationwide industry level issue in that bottom line is right now we've got more fed cattle being produced collectively in all of the feedlots than we have capacity in this industry to process. And so the industry is struggling right now. The packing industry is struggling right now to move through these cattle in a timely way. We're not very current right now. We're getting backed up a little bit. We're seeing carcass weights go up counter seasonally right now. And so there's just some real challenges in terms of working through this set of supplies. It's not a long-term issue. It's probably a matter of a few weeks to perhaps a few months at most, but it's certainly an issue right now.
You think this is going to last quite a while, or you think it'll balance out and get back to normal after we see more people back in the plants from COVID recovery?
Well, there's labor issues there. That's part of the challenge. Part of the overall challenge is the fact that over many years of chronic excess capacity in the packing industry, that eventually went away. And so for about the last 4 years or so, we have almost 5 years, we have estimated that, and this was the same time we had a cyclical expansion in cattle numbers. And so for the first time in 30 to 35 years, we actually have a net deficit of packing capacity on average in the industry. And when you aggravate that sort of physical level of capacity with some additional labor issues, then you get into the situation we're in right now. And you combine that with the fact that really the current set of fed cattle that we're trying to work through is really in part was aggravated by everything that happened last year. So the net effect of all the pandemic impacts, even though our worst problems were last summer, but the net effect of all of that was that we brought some cattle into 2021 that probably would have under a more normal year gotten processed earlier. And so, so we've kind of piled up additional supply on top of additional capacity limitations, and that sets up the situation that we're in right now.
With that excess capacity now pretty much gone, are we seeing a higher demand now, which is maybe leading to that?
Well, on the meat side, of course, demand has been exceptionally good, and obviously we see that reflected today in these extremely strong box beef prices, wholesale beef prices. So on the one hand, on the meat side of things, we've got strong demand. We could certainly add some additional supply to the market right now if we could produce it. But because of the packing capacity constraints, we simply can't process it. And then, of course, the other side is with the capacity constraints in place, that tempers the demand for fed cattle, and it's kept that fed cattle market really capped most of this year at levels that, they would have certainly been higher had we had the capacity to process more cattle. And so we've got this, you can call it a disconnect. It's just this physical limitation that sort of separates those two markets here. And that'll be in place, I think, for a period probably of a few weeks. But, we've been saying all along that the first half of the year was going to be a bit of a struggle. The second half of the year looked more optimistic. I guess the only thing that's changed in my view in terms of kind of an outlook perspective is that maybe the third quarter becomes a little more suspect now, that we may struggle to get ourselves cleaned up and maybe see some of that optimism as early as the third quarter. It might take more towards the fourth quarter and towards the end of the year before we really get to that point.
Are you seeing differences in the regions of the country where, say, cattle numbers and prices are higher or lower in some places than they are in others?
I don't really see anything other than the normal regional differences there are. I mean, certainly the cattle industry is quite different, from north to south in one sense, and a bit from east to west. But those are kind of normal patterns that are in place. There's most of the issues we're talking about here are pretty consistent across the country at this point. And even though we don't like to ship fed cattle a long ways, if we had a severe, sort of regional imbalance, we would move cattle one way or the other to kind of balance that out. There's just no place to go right now, and so one of the indications of just how stressed that packing sector is right now from a capacity standpoint is one of the best measures we have of that in terms of data is Saturday slaughter levels. And so we monitor, packers really their only flexibility on a week-to-week basis is scheduling 0, 1, or 2 shifts on Saturday. They do that with their, with a week's notice typically in their labor contracts. And anytime we see that Saturday kill level go up, that means that they're really pushing that sector, if you will. And what we've seen in so far in 2021 is Saturday kill levels that are running about 50% bigger than the same period a year ago, and about 128% bigger than they were for that same period in 2019. So, again, it's pretty clear that the packing sector is pushing hard to process more cattle. They just simply can't do any more right now in the short run.
Producers are having to deal with this as well as higher feed costs. Pretty much a double whammy for them right now, isn't it?
It certainly is. Again, this really effectively caps that fed cattle market. Potential demand just simply cannot be expressed with the limitations that are in place. And then obviously the feed market has just changed dramatically in recent months, and especially even more so in recent weeks. And so, again, this challenge that we're in right now is going to take, now the feed cost thing probably isn't going to go away as I see it at this point. I think that's going to be with us certainly through the rest of this year and probably beyond that. But the other issues in terms of the numbers thing will work its way out here as we go through the next few weeks. Typically, seasonally, we see the largest total cattle slaughter in this country in May and June. So we're kind of heading into our crunch time, and we're already stressed. So we're going to have several more weeks of challenges, but then eventually we will work past that and we will get caught up. I just think it's going to take certainly well into the summer probably before we get there.
What advice do you have for the producers at this point?
Well, if you're a cattle feeder, you've got cattle on feed, you can't do a great deal with that at this point in time. You're kind of committed. They're on a timeline. You can maybe adjust a little bit, but you can't dramatically change things. So now in terms of placements, you may want to give some thought to whether or not you want to adjust it on the front end so that you're changing that flow going forward. But you just have to kind of work through it at this point, and until the market kind of clears itself up. I'm not sure that in the short run you have a lot of options at this point.
Anything you'd like to add today?
I don't think so. Again, we've got we're seeing some some structural adjustments, if you will. Some of these are a long time in the making. These aren't things that happened overnight. They've been actually sort of building for a number of years, but they kind of come to a head under the current set of market conditions. And so we'll see how we work through these, and then we'll also see longer term what kinds of responses we might see to this.
Darrell Peel with Oklahoma State University. Thanks for joining us today on Brownfield.
You bet. Happy to do it.